MMA star Conor McGregor may have been silent as he left an Irish courtroom, having just been found liable for sexual assault, but he later exploded on social media, raging against the woman that a jury says he raped in a hotel room back in 2018. We've got the results from the courtroom, McGregor's weekend meltdown, and what is next for everyone involved in the case as we sit down with a reporter from Dublin. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Conor McGregor, the mixed martial artist known for his brash attitude, both in and out of the ring, now has to pay a Dublin woman around $250,000. Why? Because a weeks-long trial in Irish High Court ended with a jury agreeing that he assaulted this woman, Nikita Hand, sexually assaulted her. The trial has gotten a lot of media attention worldwide. We focused upon it here on Sidebar multiple times, and we're actually going to sit down with a BBC Dublin reporter in just a moment to get further details about what was happening in that courtroom. But first, here is a quick timeline of how we got here. So, 35-year-old Nikita Hand says that back in December of 2018, she went to a Christmas party for the hair salon where she worked. And Nikita admitted that she was drinking heavily, she did cocaine, and at some point during the night, she was messaging on Instagram with UFC star Conor McGregor. The two reportedly knew each other. They grew up in the same part of Dublin. They were part of the same friend group. Now, Nikita and a friend, they ended up meeting up with McGregor, as well as one of his friends, James Lawrence. So two men here. They all went to the Beacon Hotel to keep the party going, but Nikita says that when her friend and Lawrence went to another room to have sex, McGregor started to come on to Nikita, and he wouldn't take no for an answer. Now, according to her own testimony in court, McGregor used his body weight to pin her down, choked her, and eventually sexually assaulted her. She testified that she thought he might actually kill her that night. That's also why she says she was scared to report the attack, why she told her friends and family to delete messages about it, that she was afraid if word got out, McGregor would hurt her. And when Nikita got home, she apparently tells her boyfriend that she had been raped, refused to say by whom though. The paramedics were called. Nikita told them that she had been attacked. She apparently had a panic attack on the way to the hospital. One paramedic testified that she examined Nikita and saw bruising on her chest and around her neck and down her legs. She had said, quote, she hadn't seen someone so bruised in a long time. All of that was captured on a camera inside of the ambulance. According to doctors who would eventually testify at this civil trial, Nikita had been using a tampon at the time of the assault, and now it was, sorry to say, wedged painfully inside of her. One doctor said that he had to use forceps to remove it. In early 2019, Nikita reported the assault to police, and they launched an investigation. Now, McGregor was questioned, but he was released. And apparently he offered the police a prepared statement and then answered no comment to all of the other questions that they had asked him. As part of their investigation, police learned from James Lawrence that he had actually had consensual sex with Nikita on that same night, but Nikita says she doesn't remember it at all. Now, the prosecutor decided not to charge Conor McGregor criminally, but that didn't stop Nikita Hand from trying to find justice another way because she filed a civil lawsuit against him. And that's what she did in 2021. She also named James Lawrence as a defendant too, saying that he raped her as well. Now, both men, they adamantly denied any bad behavior. McGregor claiming on the stand, because he took the stand, that the athletic sex he had with Nikita Hand was consensual. And after several days of testimony from not only doctors and eyewitnesses, but also Nikita and McGregor themselves, the jury determined that McGregor was liable for raping and battering Nikita. And the jury ordered him to pay damages that totaled around 249,000 euros, so about $250,000, $260,000. So 60,000 euros were awarded for general damages, 4,500 euros for medical damages. Damages for loss of earnings totaled a little more than 185,000 euros. And then special damages were almost 189,000 euros. There were no aggravated damages or exemplary damages that were awarded in this case. But remember, as I said, she sued two men. So the jury, when it came to James Lawrence, they didn't find him liable. They said he did not sexually assault Nikita Hand that night, and he was cleared. Now, similar to the United States, the standard of proof in Ireland's civil court is lower than in a criminal court. You don't have to prove something 100% beyond a reasonable doubt that something happened. But in Ireland, I think they call it balance of the probabilities. Here we call it preponderance of the evidence. More likely than not, something happened. And by the way, because this was a civil case in civil court, there weren't the same protections for people involved in the suit. For example, while Irish media, by law, couldn't name McGregor publicly while police were investigating him, they can and did during the civil proceedings. The courtroom during that trial was packed with spectators and reporters, but there were no cameras. Now, one of those reporters in that courtroom every day was BBC Dublin reporter Aoife Moore, and she joins me right now for a peek behind the curtain. Thank you so much for coming on. First of all, before we got started, you were telling me how much attention this case was getting in Ireland. Just set the stage for us about how many people were following and how big it was.
Yeah, I think, for a bit of background, MMA was not a thing in Ireland until Conor McGregor came along. There was no mention of the sport, there was no interest in the sport, and there were very few gyms. Conor McGregor put MMA on the map in Ireland, and then a lot of people would say Conor McGregor put Ireland on the map when it came to a section of people who really didn't know anything about Ireland and maybe didn't know any Irish celebrities or anything like that. So he, as you know, is one of the richest sportsmen in the world. And he's from Dublin. He's from a very deprived area of Dublin. And when he first started out in the sport, there was a lot of, and still is, a lot of hometown support for Conor McGregor. This notion of the boy that done good, he didn't come from money, he didn't come from anything, and he's built his way up to being the richest sports star, or richest Irish sports star anyway. So I think the interest was always going to be palpable, and I think the type of case that it was really compounded that, because if this had been a criminal case, we would not have known Nikita Hand's name, because the victims are always anonymous in these cases. And because it was a civil case, it was widely, reported on. There was pictures of Nikita, there was pictures of Conor going in every day. And it became this soap opera that people were tuning into every night. And I think, the level of detail that came from the paramedics and the solicitors, Nikita herself, then Conor McGregor took the stand, then James Lawrence took the stand. It was like, for some people anyway, tuning in like a soap opera. And I think a lot of people were really distressed. And I've heard that a lot. A lot of people were very distressed by the details that came out in the case. And you need to remember, this is happening in a time in Ireland when we're actually having a general election. We're about to elect our next government. But this story had blown the election out of the water.
Wow.
It had become a much more popular story than our own general election.
What was it like in that courtroom every day?
Some days were easier than others. I think anyone, including Conor McGregor and Nikita, would agree with that. Nikita Hand spent a number of days on the stand in which she was incredibly distressed. It was quite hard to be in the room. I think it was hard for anyone to listen to. She was very hysterical at crying at times. There was often, we would have to take breaks. The court would have to go into recess to give her time to compose herself again. And the jury, when we were looking over at the jury, even some of the jury looked quite distressed because Nikita was so distressed. Then the day everyone waited for was the day Conor McGregor got up on the stand, because he is a celebrity. Nikita Hand is not. And there was, Conor McGregor is known as the showman. So there was kind of this expectation of how is he going to be on the stand? Like, how is he going to conduct himself? And at times you could hear a pin drop. And you remember, as a member of the media, you're not just watching the stand, you're watching the jury as well. You want to see their reactions. There was 8 women, 4 men, which is rare enough. It's to have a woman in the majority. But days were incredibly distressing. Some of the press were incredibly distressed at some of, the evidence that we got from doctors and paramedics and things like that. And there was times that Nikita Hand's boyfriend, who sat with her in the seats, he was quite distressed. You could see him visibly crying as well. And this is against the backdrop of a balcony, a public balcony, where members of the public can go in to watch this case. And there was a lot of young men. there was some young people in their school uniforms that had obviously not gone to school that day, but came into the court because they wanted to see Conor McGregor. And the public gallery was packed. On the bottom floor where we were, it was standing room only, and that was just for press. Press were arguing with each other about seats. And
how big is this courtroom?
Tiny.
Really? Oh, it sounds like there's so many. Oh my gosh.
Oh no, I remember when I was training to be a journalist, and I thought courtrooms were like these things you saw on TV. These huge big rooms. No, like I wouldn't say even an American size living room, a standard Irish size living room, I think is probably the only way to describe it. It could maybe only fit 50 people in the ground floor.
Oh wow.
So it was very, very small. Some days the air conditioning was blasting, so it was very cold, and other days they had the heat blasting, so it was very hot. So all that as well, but one of those cases I think that will stay with everyone who was there.
Hey, I just want to take a quick minute away from what is a very, very difficult story. I wanted to ask you something random, super random. Any of you business owners out there, maybe those of you thinking of trying to start a business? Well, if you are, we have this great sponsor I just want to talk to you about real quick. It's called Odoo. Odoo is a free all-in-one business management software, and it provides you with a range of applications that helps with the day-to-day of owning a business. So here's something really cool in their Odoo apps. It's their project apps. Multiple views in the project app, like the Kanban view that organizes tasks by stage, or the Gantt view that gives you a timeline of your tasks. Seriously, makes things so simple and easy to organize. Also in their projects app, you can directly bill customers according to time spent on tasks, which is such a time saver. So right now, you can click our link, odoo.com/LC Sidebar 4. Try Odoo and their projects app for free today. When you're watching the testimony of Nikita Hand and Conor McGregor, I mean, literally it's a case of he said, she said, two different versions. Based on what you saw, I mean, we reported it, there were no cameras, but we reported what was said, but weighing how they both testified, did it make sense to you, the jury's verdict in the end?
It wasn't so much between Conor McGregor and Nikita Hand that the public opinion believes that it went with Nikita. It was the evidence of the doctors and the paramedics. There is a feeling from the public when you're speaking to people and other members of the media, they would say, you know, whatever you think of how Nikita handled it herself and how Conor handled themselves, it was the evidence of paramedics and psychologists and doctors. And I think, without being too graphic, but I think, you know, the injuries, the gynecological injuries that Nikita suffered as well, I think that for a lot of people that was the strongest evidence, because as you say, this was a he said, she said, but it's the other evidence that becomes more important then.
Did he come off as credible though when he was explaining his version of events? I mean, he talks about having athletic sex and that it was a great time and it was enjoyable. But when you heard him say this, how did he come off on the stand? Did he seem credible?
Credible, I suppose, is up to everyone's going to have their own biases going into this, and I think you have to take Conor McGregor as someone who has reached the pinnacle of his career. I think maybe some people were surprised at how timid at points he was on the stand. He said himself, he was terrified to be accused of rape. He said it was an alien situation for him to be in. He did, however, lose his temper on the stand. He did. He was at one point slightly chastised by the judge because of his manner on the stand. And I think that was a big thing for people because just to put him in comparison with Nikita Hand, she never really faltered in that she was so distressed the entire way through it. Whereas Conor McGregor went through more range of emotions and he spent a lot less time on the stand as well. There was a long back and forth between himself and Nikita's legal team. And he seemed to not enjoy it when it was brought up that he had been defeated in the octagon. And that was, well, I'm not a legal expert, but many people say that was on purpose, you know, trying to goad Conor McGregor into losing his temper. But I think we saw a few different sides of Conor McGregor on the stand. And he was very upset, visibly upset, when the verdict came through that he had been found liable. He had his mother on one side and his partner on the other. And that was the first time both those women had attended court because it had just been Conor and his father, Tony, the entire time. But on the last day when the verdict was expected, his mother and his partner Dee Devlin came with him, and there was immediate distress within the McGregor camp that he had been found liable. And they have already said that they will be appealing this, and Conor has tweeted as much as well.
So I want to get into that in a minute, what the response has been. But to go back, it took the jury 6 hours to come to this decision. Nikita spoke outside the courtroom when this verdict came down, and she said, in part, that she wants to show her own daughter, as well as every other boy and girl, that you can stand up for yourself. She said, if something happens to you, no matter who the person is, justice will be served. To all the victims of sexual assault, I hope my story is a reminder that no matter how afraid you might be, speak up. You have a voice and keep on fighting for justice. She was really emotional, right, when she was giving that statement. Were you there when she was making that? I mean, what did you take away from it?
And I think I was actually personally surprised that she did speak to the media, just because she had been so private up to this point. And it had been such a distressing time for her to go through this case. It was very clear she was distressed. I think you need to look at her statement within the context of Ireland itself. For a long time, Ireland did not talk about sex, let alone sex abuse. It was, up until very recently, a very Catholic country. And women have not come forward. And still do not. And I know that is obviously true for across the world, but in Ireland specifically, because of the reign of the Catholic Church for so long, speaking about sex, especially to come forward as a survivor, was not done. And from what I have heard from other women and female politicians in the last few days, is that it's been kind of labelled this small glimmer of hope for Irish women. That, she is seen as this kind of very normal girl, with her small child, taking on someone so big and so powerful and having the odds stacked against her and seeing that she can win. And I think, the outpouring of support, both for Conor McGregor and Nikita Hand, has been palpable. There's actually a protest in Dublin tonight in support of Nikita Hand. So we're on Monday now. So on Monday night.
And wow, that's amazing. To flip it, McGregor, as you said, who was with his partner Dee Devlin, they were in this courtroom on Friday. They didn't speak with reporters after the verdict, but he goes on social media and he just blasts the process. And this is a now deleted tweet from Saturday. McGregor blasted the courts, congratulated his friend James Lawrence. He wrote, 2 men falsely accused, one vindicated, the other soon to be. Congrats, James Lawrence, on absolute exoneration. Then later on in the tweet, McGregor called the verdict absolute nonsense. How these lies were accepted, I will never know. A court of feeling and opinion brainwashed into people via the mainstream media, not of fact. Now, he deleted that long message, instead reposted comments from a supporter instead. Aoife, what did you think of that?
I wasn't surprised. Conor McGregor has been known to be a big user of social media. He has been known to express very controversial opinions on social media, and we have seen that throughout his career. He also deleted a tweet in which he insulted a member of the press. And he seemed to be very aware of the press the entire way through the trial and had concerns about how he was being portrayed. And I suppose that's obviously normal for someone of his stature in his career, but he did have big concerns about it. I think, it was very clear, and it is clear from those tweets, that he feels very wronged. He is not over. This is not over for Conor McGregor, and he will appeal this. Now, he said that he felt it was a kangaroo court. He said that it was judged on opinions and feelings. That's obviously an opinion he's allowed to have, but you can't appeal on those grounds. You have to appeal on basis of something that had been left out of the trial.
Good to know. That's the same thing we have here in the United States. Yeah. So, yeah.
So even though he feels like he got a raw deal in terms of opinion, it's still the jury's opinion. So if he wants an appeal, he'll have to come up with something bigger than that he had a hard time due to public opinion.
It's a little bit of a legal question. Anything that they might say, hey, this was wrong, something happened during the course of the trial that was an incorrect ruling, was a piece of evidence that shouldn't have been allowed in. Any insight about how they might appeal?
Conor McGregor did allude to that in the tweet. He said that he felt that not all the evidence had been put forward, and from what I picked up, he was alluding to the fact that some had been left out. So that could be a legal route that his legal team decide to go down if they want an appeal. And you better believe Conor McGregor will be throwing everything at this.
Yeah. Let me ask you about James Lawrence real quick. Do you think he was found not liable because of the surveillance footage where it appears that he and Nikita were, intimate together and there didn't seem to be any form of distress?
Yeah, I think the CCTV footage played a big part in James Lawrence's exoneration. The entire thing, I think, even became a bit confusing for the jury as well, although I can't speak for them. Nikita Hand said that she had no recollection, and when the Gardaí told her that James Lawrence had said they had sex, she was incredibly shocked. She said that she had told James Lawrence at the time that Conor McGregor had raped her, and he in that moment had tried to comfort her. So she was incredibly shocked when the Gardaí told her, yeah, well, James is saying that you've had sex now. And I do think that CCTV footage, which we saw a lot of, and I would love to be able to tell your viewers and listeners that this was explosive CCTV. It was incredibly dull. It was two drunk people going up and down in a lift in a hotel for the guts of 40 minutes, trying to work out lift buttons without a hotel key card. But the body language in that lift did not show Nikita in any great fear of James Lawrence or any great distress of James Lawrence. And James Lawrence spent even less time on the stand than Conor McGregor and Nikita Hand. But he said that his story had never faltered, that he was very, very sure of what happened and he had never had any other story. So I think the story of the day and the story for the jury, I think, was always going to be Conor McGregor. And that's why I think the CCTV found James not liable.
What about the CCTV of McGregor and Nikita? What did that show?
Again, there's very little of Nikita and McGregor. There's a group of them in the lift. And again, there doesn't seem to be any hostility or anger between either of them. To me anyway, and I think to a lot of people, and Nikita herself said on the stand that it is very clear from the CCTV that Nikita is drunk, very drunk. At one point, she's sitting on the ground of the lift. And, there's a lot of swaying around and stuff. But again, seem to be no hostility. She doesn't look distressed. She doesn't look upset in the lift, but she does look incredibly drunk. And she said herself that she had no recollection of being in the lift whatsoever.
And going back to Lawrence, you talked about how Conor McGregor plans to appeal. There's been talk that James Lawrence might file a countersuit against Nikita. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, he posted on his Instagram over the weekend that he had been exonerated, but he also he said that Nikita Hand had lied and that he said that it wasn't over for him either. I don't have the exact text in front of me, but he said it wasn't over for him and that he could countersue if he wants to do that. And from what I saw on Instagram on Saturday, it very much appears that might be his plan.
Wow. All right, so the story will continue. Even more, maybe you will continue it for the BBC and maybe come back on here to tell us the next stage of it. Really, thank you so much. I know I've covered these kinds of cases before. I was in the Harvey Weinstein trial in New York. And so sexual assault cases are incredibly difficult to listen to and especially difficult to cover. So I give you a lot of credit for being able to be in that courtroom day in and day out. And thank you so much for the great reporting and coming on here on Sidebar to talk about it. Really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you so much.
You got it. All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.